Education right now. I work at Austin ISD and I'm like a chief of staff to the deputy superintendent. And so, you know, in graduate school, I was not interested in education, even though there are huge issues in it. And I think because of all the issues, I didn't want to engage. Something always felt sort of off and not right. And at LBJ, I found more of like ed reform or more like neoliberal things that did not resonate with me. But I ended up staying in Austin because of this job and was brought under the wing of someone who was an incredible ed progressive, constructivist educator, someone who celebrated dual language and someone who was interested in student family autonomy. And so under that, and being at Austin ISD for 5 years and being one of the youngest people at central office, which is basically like the man, and is also a huge bureaucracy, which is a whole other thing. I also bring that lens of intersectionality and what does this mean for people who are poor and who are also people of color or just people of color in general. And those conversations I think are happening, especially at the school level. Central office is way, way more political and is very fast-paced and is very much about crisis management. And you know, there's a few of us there, but you can see in education, and especially in public education, if we're going to say that the government needs to provide this free education for everyone, then it needs to be high quality. And it needs to not socialize our kids and our families in a way to be compliant, right? Thinking about like pedagogy of the oppressed, like we want people who can think differently and start to reimagine things beyond where we are in white supremacy. So to get myself off that rant, yes, I bring that lens. It's been interesting to be there because I think I'm not an educator other than my K through post-secondary, which does make me a part of education, but I don't have that teacher background. So I think I sort of see things differently. It's seeing things about like systems and also connecting with people, having that like social work background and listening to people and really trying to cultivate my own emotional intelligence, because that also has to do with being a feminist, is being able to see things that other people don't see. So,
yeah, so I think I mentioned I've been doing my PhD work now. Before I did my PhD, I went to law school, and actually the year before I went to law school, I was in DC because I decided to move to DC to work, and before starting this job, I ended up having dinner because Gloria ended up being in the city at the same time as me, and she told me, she said, I think there's a time where professors see something in you more than you see in yourself, and it takes you a while to kind of see what they see, and she was very encouraging to me to continue in academia, and she said, DC it's like Disneyland, you know, there's a lot of things to do here, but sometimes the things that people are doing here are kind of superficial, right? They're not really something I think you would want to be doing, and I went to law school and learned that the hard way, like that all of the great ideas about how to fix the world have already been thought of. I mean, how do we fix gender pay gaps? We know how to do that, but there's a lack of will, right? And I confronted a place in DC where I thought I was going to try to change the way people thought, and really you have to sort of change the way people want to engage or think about a problem. And I think the urgency, I think some people have mentioned this already, the urgency around what to do with change is perhaps a bit more acute now that we have Trump and now that we have this new political environment that seems especially hostile to people who are marginalized, not just women, but everyone. And so I went off to do my PhD, in part because I think that my skills and the place where I need to be is in the academy, and I need to be thinking in the academy. And I feel like my training in women and gender studies, my training at UT generally, but my training in women and gender studies has really allowed me to think about problems, allowed me to think about intellectual issues in a much more creative way than folks in my program or folks that I encounter who don't have training in feminist theory, don't have training in gender studies. So in my work, I look at labor organization in tourism spaces. I'm really interested in how workers are organizing in the service sector, and I'm interested in this because it's actually a deeper feminist problem, which is the value of work and what does work mean to people. And so, you know, you often hear politicians will say we need to bring back manufacturing. Manufacturing is well paid. Manufacturing is high skill. But if you look at the history, right, manufacturing isn't any more high skilled than any other job. In fact, that's the beauty of the assembly line. You don't need to be high skilled to do manufacturing. You assemble a tire, somebody assembles an engine, somebody assembles a door, and then you have a car, right? It's very much simple and it's not high skill. The reason we think it's high skill is because we associate that work with masculinity. And we don't appreciate the work that labor undertook in the early 1900s to turn manufacturing into from a low skill form of employment to a very high skill form of employment. And that was a legal and a cultural and a social change that had nothing to do with the actual skill set to complete those jobs. Well, now we have an economy where more and more people work in service labor, and service labor is obviously feminized, so people think it's low skill. So they'll say, working at McDonald's is an easy job, but everyone I know who has worked at McDonald's for 40 hours a week will tell you it is not easy. It actually takes a lot of skill, it takes a lot of labor, it takes a lot of patience, it's hard work. And so how are workers trying to change the conversation right now around the value of work, and in what ways are they doing this without perhaps making the same mistakes of the past, which is to over-masculinize or associate that work with masculinity. And so I'm really interested in one of the labor unions that I study, they're hotel worker unions in Playa del Carmen. They're very interested in trying to think about the value of work without having to deal with the kind of burden of making it more masculine or associated with masculinity. Because we know that as work becomes associated with masculinity, we marginalize other kinds of work in the process. And so I'm really interested in these questions of future of work, and I don't think I would have ever come to the thinking that I do without my training in feminist studies. And I really, really appreciate, you know, all of the kind of knowledge that I gained for being in this program, because I don't think it's just, for me, I feel like people often want to associate us as not doing serious academic work, and I think I mentioned this a little bit when I asked Mary this question, and in fact I think we're doing the most serious academic work. We're at this moment of political crisis, we're at this moment where people are unsure of what to do next, but we're very sure of what to do next because we've been saying we should be doing this stuff forever, right? We're actually the ones I think who are closer to what the answers might look like, are closer to where our knowledge could be much more productive than repeating the same mistakes of the past. And so for me, I see there being a lot of intellectual value into what we're doing, and I obviously I'm biased or trying to be in the academy, but I see so much of the way we think having to have more of a role in the academy and more of the role of the way professors see problems or frame problems. So that for me is, I think, where my work really sort of has its roots in the kind of training I did here almost 2 years ago, or 10 years ago, rather.
Right, it's been a long time.
Yeah.
So for me these days, if it's related to abortion, I'm doing it. I actually can think of the exact moment that I got involved with this. I was actually writing a paper for Ixchel's class, and my paper was talking about connecting consciousness raising in the 60s and 70s to online spaces today. And I had found a blog by some clinic escorts out of Louisville, Kentucky, and just seeing what these women go through in the 2000s to get their procedure was appalling to me. It was disgusting. And so that semester I reached out to some abortion clinics and other activists in town and started volunteering, and I was like, well, I'm going to do this until I find my Middle Eastern Studies relevant job, right? But what ended up happening is I ended up working pretty much every job you can imagine in an abortion clinic. I've done intake, I've done counseling, I've held lots of hands in the procedure rooms, I've done recovery, I've managed clinics, and basically and similar to what Brandon has said, you know, we've been doing the same things for 30 years since 1973, and we've lost so much ground. So now my work is really looking, you know, the Audre Lorde's idea of the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house is so relevant to the work that I do, because the state house, I mean, you think about Texas and the federal legislature, it doesn't feel like we've come any closer to making abortion more available or safer for women than it's been in 40 years now, I guess. So what I'm working on is a thing called an abortion access hackathon. So I live in Northern California now. The tech industry is really huge there. And the hackathon concept is basically, it originated at places like Google, Amazon, Facebook, you know, these, Microsoft, Apple. You put all your best and brightest brains in a room and you come up with creative solutions or new ideas for, you know, whatever challenges or, you know, new things that your company wants to do. So we've taken that and applied it to abortion access, right? So we find skilled volunteers, whether it be in the tech industry or law, policy, we're including visual arts now, and we match them with reproductive justice organizations. So a lot of people who run clinics, who run reproductive justice organizations, they don't have time to manage these new things, you know, to manage these extra things, right? They're focused on making sure patients get seen that day. They're making sure that their patients and their staff are safe, and they are exhausted. And so what my group does is we find the volunteers, we vet them, and we match their skills based on what the organization needs. And we've had 3 hackathons so far. We've had 2 in Northern California and 1 in New York City. And our next one is going to be in Austin next year. So yeah, we've had a lot of great projects come out of the hackathon. We've built fundraising platforms, case management software, and these things are like, they don't sound really sexy when it comes to abortion access, right? But this is what makes an organization run, and they're the tools that they use on a daily basis. And if you have a tool that doesn't work right for you, it can make your life hell. So no, I was telling Kaylee, I think the coolest thing that we've come up with is an app called Vet It. And what the app does, you know, one of the biggest things we heard from organizations is like, I'll have a volunteer, but like, I don't know how to do background checks. I don't know how to do research on who they are or whether, you know, what they're doing is legit. And so what the potential volunteers do is they sign up on the app, they sign in with their social media, and it combs through the content of their social media, right? You as the you know, person from the organization, you don't necessarily see the content, but what the app does is based on the words and the content of your social media, gives you sort of a likelihood of where that person might lie on the abortion rights spectrum. Mm-hmm. It's still in the beta testing process, which we're still like working out, you know, improving things and fine-tuning how it works. But we have a lot of clinic escort programs and advocacy groups who are using the app now and are really enjoying its use. So my focus is basically finding new ways and new tools to further abortion access that are outside of that traditional political, let's vote, let's show up at the state house, let's testify. You know, Wendy Davis's filibuster was amazing and you know, emotion driven and an incredible experience, but what happened right after, right? The legislature came back and changed all the rules, so it didn't really matter. Actually, it did matter. It was an incredible experience, but it was just a small step. Like it now feels like such a long time ago. So I'm trying to find the new things to do.
I'm working in film and I'm currently a freelancer. I've worked with a lot of nonprofits, the Women's Community Center of Central Texas, Latinitas, Mexicarte, and freelance for a lot of nonprofits, and so now I'm trying to get my career more stabilized and advance to do fictional films hopefully in the future. So since I did journalism and WGS and a little bit of film, I felt like I was like a little bit like behind technically from other people, but I feel like I learned a lot about, you know, like the characters that I want to cover in my films. Like I really want to focus on women of color, and so I've done documentaries about different women leaders in Austin. We're actually showing some videos on the Loop, me and Dane'el. We worked together on a series called Making Austin Her Story, and so it's really interesting because a lot of those women have gone on to do other things. So it is kind of like a historical thing of like what some of these women in Austin were doing, like with Workers' Defense Project and the Texas Independent Living Council, the woman that ran that. Now she's like onto like bigger or different things, and we have that video showing over there. And so now that I've done documentary a little bit, not that I've mastered it at all, but I'm really like interested in fictional work. Now like we see like all these like awesome articles and pop culture stuff on social media about like Game of Thrones and Stranger Things and like The Handmaid's Tale and stuff like that, like, you know, analyzing pop culture, which is really interesting. That's kind of what I liked in WGS. Like, I wanted to do like media, pop culture journalism at first when I started, but I guess now on the other end, like I want to create the content. So yeah, I'm also always been a big horror fan, and yeah, like I didn't focus on that in school, I guess because I was a little bit more in like the harder activism stuff, like yeah, social issue documentaries. But I guess now, yeah, I do see like how you can introduce like these concepts into like a horror film with like a woman of color character, and I also like, it's not a horror but like Obvious Child, I feel like it was really well done, like a movie about abortion and stuff, and also I feel like bisexuality is something that I want to present in like women of color characters, because I feel like they're not really represented that well in media, and so I kind of want to, yeah, make horror films or drama films like about women of color, and I've been writing a script for that, and so yeah, a lot of this has also been after graduating, building good like working habits and stuff like that, because I didn't end up going into like a really solid like job. I'm kind of like, yeah, freelancing all over the place, and but I feel, yeah, WGS really did kind of help me, because since I'm like a person that's all over the place, it helped me still have that thread going like throughout everything, you know, focusing on intersectionality and women's studies and everything that I do, and so now I hope that that shows through once like I make like a feature film one day, that it's something that's a good representation of women, and because there's a lot of films, especially like in horror or like sci-fi, that are about women or people of color that are directed by men or like white people, and so sometimes, well, most of the times they're getting everything wrong. Even like the new Blade Runner movie came out, and it's very like Asian culture inspired, like everything that you're seeing, but there are like no like Asian people in the movie. You know, the main character is a white person, Ryan Gosling, and so which he's cool and everything, but it's like you do want to see more. So yeah, I am inspired by like